When Sarah walked into the small, dimly lit antique store, she felt an immediate sense of intrigue. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and the faint odor of something more musty, like old memories lingering in the corners. Rows of dusty shelves lined the walls, each holding objects of forgotten stories, cracked porcelain dolls, tarnished silverware, and yellowed photographs. But it was something in the back corner that caught her eye. On a wooden pedestal, nestled beneath a thick layer of dust, was a mask. It wasn't like the cheap plastic ones she'd seen in party stores. This one was exquisite. The delicate curves and intricate details of the design seemed almost too fine to be crafted by human hands. The mask's face was smooth, its features elongated and elegant, but with something unsettling about its eyes, deep, hollow spaces that seemed to stare right through her. Sarah couldn't help but feel drawn to it. As she walked closer, the dim light from the single bulb overhead seemed to flicker, casting strange shadows over the mask. It felt as if the mask were watching her, waiting for her to make the decision. The store owner, an elderly man with hunched shoulders and pale, veiny hands, appeared at her side without a sound. He spoke in a low, raspy voice. "A fine choice. It's one of a kind, handcrafted, passed down through generations. Not many know of its true power." Sarah, a little taken aback by his sudden appearance, smiled politely, unsure whether to take him seriously. "I'm just looking for something for a costume party," she said. "Something unique. How much is it?" The man's eyes glinted with something she couldn't quite place. "It is not the price of the mask that matters," he replied cryptically. "It is what happens when you wear it." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but she brushed it off as nothing more than an old man's rambling. She wasn't looking for anything mysterious. She just wanted something to wear that would make her stand out. A mask that would make her look different. Better, even. "I'll take it," she said, her voice steady. The man simply nodded, and with a practiced hand, he carefully wrapped the mask in a cloth. His eyes lingered on her, as though he were trying to read her, but Sarah was already turning away, the mask now securely in her grasp. The party was in full swing when Sarah arrived at the venue. Laughter and music filled the air, the chatter of guests floating like a current, carrying them from one corner to the next. But Sarah felt a strange detachment, as though the whole scene were unfolding around her, not for her. Her mask, now sitting snugly on her face, made her feel more like a stranger than ever before. She had never felt so out of place, despite the smiles and greetings of the other partygoers. The mask, though beautiful, seemed to take on a life of its own. It was as if the moment she put it on, something shifted inside her. The eyes, hollow and empty, felt as though they were watching the world around her, and she could no longer shake the feeling that she was being observed. There were moments when her vision blurred, when her senses became dulled, and all she could focus on were the vacant eyes staring back at her from the mask. She tried to ignore it, attributing it to the wine she'd been sipping and the excitement of the evening. But the feeling of unease only deepened as the night went on. People began to look at her differently, their gazes lingering longer than she was comfortable with. At first, she thought it was just the mask, making her stand out in a crowd. But soon she realized there was something more, something unsettling about the way they looked at her. The guests' smiles were too wide, their laughter too sharp, And their eyes, oh, their eyes, seemed to have a certain emptiness, as if they weren't really seeing her at all. The clock struck midnight, and Sarah excused herself from the crowd, stepping into the quiet hallway of the house. She needed air. The mask felt heavier now, almost as if it were pressing against her skin, suffocating her. She reached up to loosen it, but the moment her fingers touched the edges, a wave of cold panic washed over her. The mask wouldn't budge. Her heart began to race. She pulled at it again, harder this time, but it stayed firmly in place. She didn't understand. She had worn plenty of masks before, never once encountering anything like this. There was no strap, no string, nothing to hold it in place. It simply sat on her face, unmoving, unyielding. Her breath grew shallow, her pulse quickening as the room around her seemed to close in. Desperately, she clawed at the edges, but the mask seemed to mold itself tighter to her skin. Her vision began to swim, the edges of her sight blurring as the pressure against her face intensified. She staggered to the nearest mirror, her movements jerky and frantic. The reflection staring back at her was no longer her own. The mask had changed, its features twisted and warped, like a grotesque parody of her face. She looked deeper into her own eyes, and that's when she saw it, a dark, shifting presence flickering beneath the mask as though it were alive. Her reflection grinned back at her, a grin that was not her own, and that was when the terror truly set in. She couldn't take it off. She couldn't escape. With one final gut-wrenching pull, Sarah wrenched the mask from her face. A sickening sound filled the room, like something tearing from deep inside her skull. But as the mask came free, something even more horrifying followed. Her face, it came with it. There was nothing left behind, no skin, no flesh, nothing but a hollow void. The mask had not been an accessory. It had been a part of her, and in that moment, when it was ripped away, so was she. The reflection in the mirror was nothing more than the empty shell of a woman, the hollowed-out remains of a person who had once been. There were no eyes, no lips, no features, just an endless gaping blackness where her humanity once resided. And as Sarah stood there, trembling in the mirror, she realized the terrible truth. The mask hadn't been a disguise. The mask had been her face all along, and now it was gone. Sarah's fingers trembled as they wrapped around the edges of the mask, trying to pry it from her face. The pressure of the mask against her skin felt like it was tightening, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Every movement she made, every tug she exerted, only deepened the sense of unease that had begun to overtake her. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection. The longer she looked, the more her own face seemed like a stranger to her. It was as though the mask was becoming a part of her, merging with her skin in ways she couldn't comprehend. Her reflection in the glass was distorted, the mask's delicate lines and features now warped into something grotesque. Sarah's mind raced. She had worn masks before, but none like this. This one had felt so real, so much more than a mere accessory. Her fingers dug into the edges once more, but the mask wouldn't budge. She pulled harder, her skin burning beneath its surface as though it were glued to her. Panic surged within her chest, and her breaths grew ragged. In her desperation, she backed away from the mirror, stumbling and clutching at her face. The mask refused to give. It felt as though it were clinging to her, its smooth surface now rough and almost alive beneath her fingertips. The longer she tried to pull it off, the more it seemed to resist, as if it were part of her. Her heart hammered in her chest, the fear escalating with every passing second. It wasn't just the sensation of the mask that unnerved her. It was the way the reflection had changed. The eyes, those hollow spaces, seemed to move independently now, no longer fixed in place. They followed her every movement, watching her with an unnerving intensity. The longer she stared, the more her own reflection seemed to twist and warp. She staggered away from the mirror, her body trembling with exhaustion, but she couldn't escape the haunting image that lingered in her mind. It was as if the mask was controlling her, dictating her every action, pulling her into its depths. She tried to breathe steadily, trying to calm her frantic heart, but nothing worked. Every breath was shallow, strained. It felt as though she was drowning in her own panic. The room around her seemed to grow smaller, the walls closing in as her vision blurred. The once vibrant colors of the party beyond the hallway faded into a muted haze, and all she could focus on was the mask. The mask that wouldn't come off, the mask that had become a part of her. She thought of the store. The elderly man's words echoed in her mind. It is not the price of the mask that matters. It is what happens when you wear it. She had thought him nothing more than a strange old man, someone who liked to spook his customers with tales of cursed objects. But now, as she stood in the hallway, her hand still clutching the edges of the mask, those words felt like a warning she had ignored. The mask had changed her, and it was changing her more with every passing second. She could feel the edges of her consciousness slipping, the clarity she had once known fading away. The weight of the mask, the pressure, was suffocating her. And then, with one final desperate motion, Sarah tore at the mask again. This time, it felt different. There was resistance, but something was giving. She tugged with everything she had, her fingers numb and raw from the effort. And then it came off. But as the mask was pulled free from her face, a sickening sound filled the air, like something tearing from deep within her. It wasn't the soft pull of fabric or the scrape of a mask being removed. It was something far worse, something far more visceral. Her heart skipped a beat as the mask slid away, and she was left standing in front of the mirror once more. Her reflection was no longer her own. At first, Sarah couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. Her face was gone, replaced by a hollow void. There were no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just a smooth, featureless expanse of skin stretched taut over the bone. She reached up, her fingers trembling, to touch where her face should have been. But there was nothing there, nothing. Her hands fell to her sides, her body frozen in place. The reality of what had just happened began to set in. She had never known fear like this, not even as a child, when the shadows in her room seemed to whisper her name. This was something far worse. This was a complete and utter loss of self. The mask had taken her face. She stumbled backward, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. It felt as though the room had tilted around her, the walls bending and shifting in a disorienting spiral. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with thoughts that made no sense. She needed help. She needed to fix this. But the more she thought, the more she realized there was no fixing this. No one could help her. Her reflection remained frozen in the mirror, the empty void where her face had once been staring back at her. It was as though she had been erased, as though she had never existed at all. She tried to scream, to call out, but there was nothing, no voice, no sound. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, and for a moment Sarah thought she might fall into the darkness, consumed by the emptiness that had claimed her. But then the faintest sound reached her ears, a whisper almost too quiet to hear, coming from the direction of the mirror. It wasn't her voice. It wasn't even a human voice. She turned slowly, her body shaking, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. The mirror, her reflection, shifted, the hollow space where her face should have been stretching and twisting. And then something began to emerge from the blackness, slowly, methodically, as though it were waking up from a long slumber. At first, it was just a shape, indistinct and dark, like a shadow moving in the corner of her vision. But then it began to take form. It was a face, not her face, not any face she had ever known. The features were unfamiliar, alien, like a distortion of human form, warped and grotesque. Its eyes were hollow, like the masks, but they were filled with something far worse, an emptiness so profound it seemed to suck in all light around it. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her mind screamed at her to run, to get away from the mirror, but her body refused to obey. She was rooted in place, frozen by fear and disbelief. The face in the mirror, a grotesque, alien version of her own, smiled. The smile was wide and unnatural, stretching far too far across its face, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. It was mocking her, taunting her. It knew what had happened, and it reveled in the horror of it. The mirror cracked. A thin, jagged line split across the glass, and from the crack, a sound began to emanate. A low, guttural growl like something ancient and malevolent. The face in the mirror contorted, the smile twisting into a snarl, and then the glass shattered completely. Shards of glass scattered across the floor, but Sarah didn't move. She couldn't move. All she could do was stare at the empty space where her face had once been. And then, as if it had been waiting for this moment, the darkness surged forward, swallowing her whole. Sarah woke to the feeling of cold, damp air against her skin, as if the world had become a ghostly wasteland. Her limbs felt heavy, as if they were made of stone, and her head was clouded with a fog she couldn't shake. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the disorienting haze from her vision. What had happened? Where was she? The darkness surrounding her was thick and oppressive, yet there was a strange glow that seemed to pulse from somewhere deep within the void. It wasn't light, not really. It was more like a shimmer, a flickering pulse of energy that vibrated through the air. Slowly, cautiously, Sarah sat up. Her body felt like it wasn't entirely hers. Her movements were slow, hesitant, as though her limbs were unfamiliar, stiff. Her surroundings were nothing like the house where the party had been. There was no music, no laughter, no chatter of guests, just silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against her ears, making it almost impossible to hear anything but the faint hum that emanated from the depths of the space around her. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she noticed the floor beneath her. It was smooth, black as coal, and appeared to stretch endlessly in all directions. There were no walls, no ceiling, just an infinite expanse of this strange, glossy surface. It looked like a void, a place between worlds, unnatural and wrong. She could feel the weight of the place, the sense that it was watching her, waiting for her to move. Her heart began to race again, but the feeling of being trapped, of being completely isolated, was overwhelming. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice strangely muffled, as though the very air around her had swallowed the sound. There was no answer. With trembling hands, she reached up to touch her face, the familiar sense of her skin, her features gone. Her fingertips brushed against smooth, empty space, and panic surged within her again. She couldn't see her reflection. There was no mirror, no surface to confirm what she already knew. But she felt the hollow emptiness where her face should have been, the absence of herself. Tears began to sting her eyes. She wiped them away frantically, as though she could somehow erase the horror that had taken root inside her. But the tears didn't come. The absence in her face seemed to have swallowed them too. It was as if everything that had once been human about her had been drained away, leaving only the void behind. A sound suddenly broke the silence, a deep, resonant thrum that came from somewhere beneath the black floor. The very air around her seemed to ripple with the sound, and a tremor of unease ran down her spine. She turned her head in every direction, searching for the source of the noise, but there was nothing to see, just the black, endless space. And then she heard it again. This time, the sound was closer, more distinct, a low guttural growl that vibrated in her chest. It was the same sound she had heard before, just before the mirror shattered. The growl was followed by a whisper, a faint murmur that seemed to come from all directions at once. She didn't understand the words. It was as if the language itself was alien, impossible to grasp. But there was no mistaking the tone. It was mocking, cruel, full of disdain for her. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Something slithered along the ground, its shape indistinct in the murky shadows, but its presence undeniable. It moved like a serpent, coiling and twisting through the blackness, its form barely discernible in the faint glow that pulsed around her. She froze, unable to move as the shape grew closer, its movement slow, deliberate. And then it spoke, not in words, but in a rush of sensation, like a voice without a sound, a presence that filled her mind, curling its cold fingers around her thoughts. "You are not meant to be here," it whispered, the voice coming from the darkness itself. "You have taken what was not yours, and now you must pay the price." The ground beneath her trembled again, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't. She had no voice, no mouth, no form with which to express her fear. The shape that had slithered toward her grew more defined, taking the form of a twisted, horrific figure. Its body was writhing, the limbs distending and reshaping themselves in ways that defied nature. The face that began to emerge from the shifting mass was one she recognized all too well, a grotesque distortion of her own face, one that seemed to have been twisted beyond recognition. It was not her face, not anymore. It was the mask, the very thing that had claimed her. The eyes, once empty, now burned with an intense, malevolent light. The smile that stretched across its face was too wide, too sharp, a reflection of the evil that had consumed her. And then it spoke again, the voice seeping into her mind like ice. "You are mine," it hissed. "You belong to the mask now. Your soul is forfeit." Her body trembled, the overwhelming weight of its words sinking in. She had known, deep down, that this was the cost, the price she would have to pay for allowing herself to be consumed by the mask. But even now, faced with the terrible reality of it, she couldn't fully accept it. She hadn't known how far the mask's reach would extend, how completely it would claim her. The figure began to laugh, a sound so twisted and wrong that it felt as if the very air around her was being torn apart. The laugh was hers in a way, yet not hers at all. It was a hollow, mocking sound that reverberated through the void, echoing in every corner of her being. But something within her stirred, a flicker of defiance, a desperate, final spark of resistance. She would not be consumed. She could not allow it. With all her strength, she reached out, her hands grasping at the empty space around her as though she could pull herself free from the grip of the void. The figure moved closer, its glowing eyes now locked on hers, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt something shift within her. The flickering light, the pulse of energy that had been emanating from the darkness, surged, growing brighter and more intense. The air around her vibrated, and for the first time since the moment she had put on the mask, she felt a spark of power. It was faint at first, but it grew stronger with each passing second. She could feel the mask's presence, its weight, its hold on her, beginning to weaken, just for a moment. She reached out, her hands trembling but determined. Her fingers brushed against something solid, something real, her own face. With a scream that echoed through the emptiness, she pulled it back. Her face, her true face, began to emerge from the darkness. The void that had consumed her, the mask that had taken her, began to unravel, breaking apart like a dream dissolving in the morning light. The laughter stopped. For a brief moment, there was silence. And then, like the first light of dawn breaking through a long, dark night, Sarah's face returned, real, whole, human. The darkness receded, its grip on her loosening as the world around her shifted. The glossy floor faded into a distant memory, and she found herself standing once more in the hallway of the house, the party's noise faint in the distance. Her heart was pounding, but she was alive. The mask, now lying discarded on the floor, was no longer a part of her. It was just an object, a beautiful, terrifying object, but nothing more. And Sarah knew deep in her bones that she would never, ever allow it to touch her again. She had faced the darkness and had come out on the other side, but there was a lingering sensation, a coldness that remained at the back of her mind, like a shadow that refused to leave. It wasn't over, not really. The mask, though broken, though abandoned, would always be there, waiting for the next person to slip it on, waiting to consume once more. Sarah stepped away from the mask, her heart still racing, her mind heavy with the weight of what had transpired. But for now, she was free, and for now, that would be enough. As the party continued behind her, she walked out into the night, knowing that she would never forget the terror she had faced. And though the mask might have been left behind, its dark influence would always remain with her, lurking in the shadows, just out of reach. But Sarah was no longer afraid, not anymore.